and welcome to this lecture on Khuswant Singh's Karma. The title of this lecture is Plotting Downfall in the Story Karma. So let's continue from our previous session and talk more about Sir Mohan Lal's interest in English culture. So, from our assessment of all the things that he admires about English culture, we can come to a good understanding about his state of mind. We can see that he has a very superficial enjoyment in the context of English lifestyle and English world. So, his pleasure is more directed at the physical side of things. For instance, he loves sports. He talks about mixed doubles, the tennis matches, and he loves having dinner, and then he also enjoys the Piccadilly prostitutes. So we can get a sense that he is a man who enjoys the material side of things, and that's very interesting, which is why I suggest that his enjoyment is superficial rather than spiritual. And more interestingly, it is a culture that is more associated with the upper classes. This culture that he sees in the landscape of Oxford universities is the material culture of the upper classes, and it is a one-sided approach to life in general. So his material pleasures that he derives through an association with the upper classes is what he thinks to be the real deal, is what he thinks as the culture of England. And one of the things, or the most important thing that he prides himself on, is his ability to converse very well like an English gentleman. And the narrator says that, the narrator of the story says that he, like a cultured Englishman, could talk on almost any subject, be it books, politics, and people. This is a very interesting statement in the story, and it is very interesting because we do not get an instance where Sir Mohan could be seen discussing in great length any of these. So it's a statement which remains to be justified, and it isn't justified within the story world of karma. And the phrase "could talk" is very interesting as well, because there's a big difference between talking about things and understanding the reality to these things. So you can talk very well about books, politics, and people without really understanding the real nature of it in terms of a practical experience as well. So again, there is a sense that there is a superficiality to all these aspects that he could converse with, and that Sir Mohan Lal couldn't or doesn't have a profound understanding of all these things, because if he does have a profound understanding of books, politics, and people, then he would have a more humane, a really cultured understanding and approach to people he comes across, and especially to his own family, such as his wife. Again, we need to realize that being very informed about books, politics, and people is one thing, and having a ethical code in your life and having a moral perspective in one's own life is an entirely different thing. So you could be well informed and not have a moral compass. So our discussion in this regard again pushes us to ask this question: what are the values that Sir Mohan Lal has in his life? So what is his value system? What does he consider as the most important thing in life? So all these questions are not really answered, or they are answered in such a way that we need to kind of work it out for ourselves and see what exactly is the value system that Sir Mohan Lal has, and it is not a very appreciable or admirable value system. Okay, again, we do get a sense that he is a man who enjoys the commodities in life, the materiality in life, the material pleasures that he can derive through objects, and even people become objects for him, which is why the reference to the Piccadilly prostitutes has been made deliberately in the story, and this again suggests that even people become objects of pleasure for him. And it's very interesting that Sir Mohan Lal in his mind makes a comparison between his own wife Lakshmi and these prostitutes that he enjoyed during his stay in England. So Lakshmi, with her sweat and raw onion smell, is more down to earth, is a very realistic human being on the Indian soil, and he doesn't want the reality, he instead wants the commodity to enjoy. Okay, the other things and the other objects and physical pleasures that he has picked up during his stay in England is most probably is whiskey, and he thinks that whiskey, his enjoyment of whiskey is something that would attract the attention of the Englishmen whom he would come across during train journeys. And he says that whiskey never failed with Englishmen. So this object, when noticed by an Englishman, would inevitably invite the Englishman to make a conversation with Sir Mohan Lal, and he could from there progress on to other discussions about English culture and lifestyle. So whiskey is an attraction just as the Balliol tie is, and most importantly the Times newspaper. So he carries all these things with him whenever he is traveling, so that he could tempt the Englishmen that he comes across. And if whiskey fails, then obviously there are the English cigarettes. So English cigarettes would also invite the attention of the Englishmen, who would be surprised to see that to see that there are these cigarettes in India, the real English cigarettes, and they would be surprised and tempted, and Sir Mohan Lal would be generous enough to share the cigarettes with these English gentlemen. So these are some of the tricks of the trade that Mohan Lal adopts to garner the attention of the Englishmen. So we can see that he really wants to be acknowledged by these so-called superior men, the Englishmen, and he wants to converse with them and kind of get an associated superiority through such discussions. Now again, we need to also reinforce the fact that his understanding is superficial. It is a very superficial understanding of what English culture is all about. During his 5 years of stay, we can only guess that he has understood the culture very superficially on a surface level, and the reference to bags and gowns is a kind of an indication that he is more attracted to the outside rather than to the interior workings of the English culture and system. And it's very interesting to note that his observations and his reference to Oxford and other things only kind of hit on the very, very visible and very noticeable side to these cultural places and people, without again delving deep into the functioning of the minds of these people. There are references to Oxford's dons and tutors and professors and all these boat races, but there is no reference to the inner workings of all these places and the teachings that it does and things like that. So we don't get to go deeper. We just stop with the surface when we read the thoughts and the ideas of Sir Mohan Lal. And he thinks that these noticeable aspects of Oxford, all these rugger matches and tennis matches and dinners and prostitutes, are very, very representative of English culture and lifestyle, whereas that is only one aspect of it and not the complete reality to the English culture and system. Now, we need to think about how exactly is this character constructed, because we are doing a character analysis of Sir Mohan Lal at great depth. Now, our question should be, is there a degree of complexity to this character? Is there a complexity in his relationship with the other characters who work with him or who revolve around him? So, let's see what are his relationships like. So, we'll first focus on his wife, with whom he is traveling and is waiting at this train station at a cantonment station. So, how does he relate to Lakshmi or Lady Mohan Lal? So, I'm going to give you an extract that tells you the day-to-day reality of Sir Mohan Lal's wife, and let's begin with her condition of existence with him. So, she lived on the upper story of the house and he on the ground floor. He did not like her poor illiterate relatives hanging about his bungalow, so they never came. He came up to her once in a while at night and stayed for a few minutes. He just ordered her about in anglicized Hindustani and she obeyed passively. These nocturnal visits had, however, borne no fruit. So, this extract neatly sums up the day-to-day existence of Lakshmi in relation to her husband, Sir Mohan Lal. And this is a very, very interesting extract in terms of several things. Begin with their physical relationship and the domestic setup as well. So, if we go back to that excerpt, we can see that she lived on the upper story while he is on the ground floor. So, there is a distance between the two. There is a physical distance between the two. And then he doesn't like her illiterate relatives to come and visit them. So, because of his attitude, they don't come home to them. And then, and again, there is a very clear indication as to how their physical side of the relationship is as well. He visits her briefly for intimacy, and when he is there, he orders her in anglicized Hindustani. Even there, in that physical side to the relationship, he doesn't behave normally or as himself. Even there, he uses anglicized Hindustani, Hindustani with a specific accent, and then she is very, very passive. So, these nocturnal visits do not have any result, in the sense that they don't have any children. So, he simply orders her and she obeys. And again, her attitude of passivity is something that we need to note, because this has an association to the finale of the story, when she responds in a particular way that makes a big comment in a symbolic way to Sir Mohan Lal's activities and behavior. And we should note that she is being ignored precisely because she doesn't know the English language and the English culture, and her husband is a big Anglophile. So because of this, illiteracy of a foreign nation, foreign culture and language, prevents these two from having a fulfilling relationship, because her husband is very, very prejudiced towards native culture and lifestyle. So we can see that he uses his wife just as he would use a servant. So there is a close relationship between the female character and the really poor working class people, such as the servants. So they seem to parallel one another in the identity that they share in the context of this particular story. So Sir Mohan Lal uses Lakshmi to have brief sexual episodes, and he uses his servants to give him, serve him whiskey, or help him with his luggage and other things. So he has a very, very functional relationship with these two categories of people that he associates himself with in the Indian context. So what do we derive in terms of our assessment of Sir Mohan Lal? So what is our assessment when we see how he relates to these two categories of people, be it his wife or be it his servants? For him, all natives are inferior, and his wife is a native and his servants are natives, and these two people are unaware of the English culture, and therefore they are all inferior. So that is what he considers. That's his perspective of Indians. So because of their lack of this knowledge about English culture, they are considered to be beneath his regard and affection too, because he reserves affection and all normal rules of behavior with his wife, primarily because she is ignorant about this foreign culture. Okay, so when we assess that particular excerpt, we understand that emotional distancing is seen in personal, physical distancing between them. So there is a massive physical, cultural and emotional distance between these two. Again, we should really notice this physical distance in terms of their domesticity, because it's very, very apparent that once again, like in many of the stories that we have read so far, there is a dysfunctional domesticity in this story too. The central protagonist, Sir Mohan Lal, has a unhappy home with Lakshmi in his bungalow. He is wealthy, he is very influential, but despite all the material comfort and luxury, he has a broken home. And that's very, very interesting if we think about the trend, so to speak, of all these stories. Why do many of these stories have unhappy homes? So that's a question that we need to ask ourselves. Okay. So we can see that again he stays only for a few minutes with her. So he barely spends any time with her, and that too when it is really and that too when he really wants to have a physical relationship. So it's a very, very weird, freakish sort of relationship. Okay. This again, the domestic context tells us that Lakshmi lives an isolated life, and it's almost as if she follows this trope of the unwanted wife in the attic, which is why I bring up this contrast between the upper story and the ground floor. Mohan Lal occupies the ground floor and she occupies the upper story, and this unwanted wife trope is sort of evoked in this setup, because in many of the great works in literature, say for example Jane Eyre, we have this unwanted wife in the attic, shut up, locked up by the husband while he carries on an affair with another woman. So this kind of parallels are noticeable here in this story too, even though there is no suggestion that he has been physically abusive and that he has locked Lakshmi up. So, but there is an evocation of such a trope. So, we have established that in Sir Mohan Lal's relationship with Lakshmi, there is no fulfilling intimacy, and the sexual relations are perfunctory, and it's very interesting to see this phrase nocturnal visits. It's almost as if these visits are demeaning to Sir Mohan Lal himself. He really seems to kind of stealthily approach her, and it's almost very primitive as well, because he couldn't suppress the urge, therefore he's there, but he doesn't really want to have such a relationship. So because of all these set of circumstances, it's very symbolic that they don't have any children, because it seems to be a sort of a poetic justice that since he doesn't seem to enjoy the company of his wife, nature doesn't think it is appropriate to give him a child. So that kind of reading can also be done, so in this context. Okay, now let's come to the physical appearance of Sir Mohan Lal and Lakshmi and see what are the contrasts between the two. If we remember the first lecture, I mentioned that he is almost handsome, he is really well groomed, and on the contrary, his wife is physically repulsive. She is fat, and Sir Mohan Lal even calls her obese. She belches, she and smells of sweat and raw onions, while he is scented with all these products. He uses, after shaving lotion, he uses talcum powder, and there is an aroma about him, whereas the aroma that is around Lakshmi comes from all the native products, the native vegetables and produce. So we can clearly once again see the distinctions between the two. One is completely westernized, the other is very, very indigenous. Okay, and even the food and the drinks that the characters consume are quite contrasting to one another. He has alcohol before boarding the first class compartment, whereas we can see the fat Lakshmi consume chapatis, crumpled chapatis, while she is sitting on her luggage. So and she also has mango pickle. It's a very, very local local food. It's a food perhaps that she herself has cooked, and again we can see that he is consuming Western products, and she is consuming the native produce and native and traditional cooked food. And we can also see that there is a distinction between the ways that they move. Sir Mohan Lal thinks that it is bad breeding to be excited, to move hurriedly, whereas we can clearly see that Lady Lal hurriedly finished off her meal. She got up, still licking the stone of the pickled mango. So there is no decorum to her, there is no etiquette that she follows, and she is hurried and she is excited. So again we can see the contrast between the two people here. What he would consider as bad breeding is exactly what she adopts in her lifestyle. So again, if we look at these two characters and their relationship to other characters around them, we can clearly see that Mohanlal treats all natives as his servants, whereas Lakshmi sees them as her equals and almost as if they are family. We can kind of get a sense of this when we study the interactions between these two characters and the others whom they come across. For example, if we want to, if we want to get a good sense of her character, we can study her conversations with the coolie with whom she chats while she's waiting for the train to arrive. And look at the way that she allows even a coolie to make conversations with her. So the coolie asks her, "Are you traveling alone, sister?" And she says, "No, I am with my master brother." So it's a very familial terminology that's being used by both the coolie and the wife of Sir Mohan Lal. And it's very significant that she uses the word master. She doesn't say, "I'm with my husband, I'm with my master," even though that could be the common way of addressing the husband in those days. But the fact that she uses the word my master in the context of all these things that we know about Sir Mohan Lal and his attitude to his wife and others, we can reasonably suggest that she sees him mostly as her master and not as a husband or companion. So that master-slave dialectic can be read in this reference to Sir Mohan Lal, whereas we have a familial relationship to the people that she comes across and with whom she has brief conversations while traveling, has that familial dynamic which is absent even in her home. Okay, and it's very significant and important to notice that he is anti-domestic, he being Sir Mohan Lal, and when he doesn't want the poor illiterate relatives to come to his house, it means that he doesn't want a family gathering around him, especially if that family is if that family members are illiterate. So when they are made unwelcome, these family members, we can easily see that the domesticity is deserted. There's hardly any human being within the home. The only two beings are Lakshmi shut up in the upper story and Sir Mohan Lal using the ground floor. So again, the deserted domesticity and the dysfunctional domesticity are the status quo that is there in the household of Sir Mohan Lal. Now, we are given a set of information about Sir Mohan Lal in this narrative, and there are certain things we do not know, but we can kind of speculate as to what could be the motivations behind his marriage to this apparently incompatible woman, Lakshmi. So we can ask this question: did he get married as a child? Because the context, the historical context for the story is pre-independence India, and marriages were formalized. Marriages took place at a very, very young age for both the participants of the wedding. So did he get married as a child? So which is why he was not very informed about all the merits and demerits of his wife. And then again, we can also speculate about his humble beginnings. Was he illiterate? Was his family illiterate to begin with? Did he have very humble beginnings? Was his upbringing very, very modest? And did he rise to eminence dominance by sheer effort of various kinds. So there is a sense of a rags to riches story, perhaps, to Sir Mohan Lal's life trajectory, which is why he behaves the way he does in later in life. However, one thing that we absolutely do know is that he is not a very complex character. His character has certain motivations, certain proclivities, and once we know them, we can easily see that his actions are motivated by his desires, and they are not very complex. So in terms of his wife Lakshmi, he is very ashamed of her, he is very embarrassed of her. Therefore they travel in different compartments. While he is in the first class coupe, she is in the Zenana interclass. I'll come back to the meaning of Zenana interclass in a minute. So again, as I said, while he is a person who enjoys his whiskey, she is a person who enjoys some of the native food varieties, and betel leaves is something that she really enjoys. So when she is in the train compartment, Zenana interclass, she thrust into her mouth till her cheeks bulged on both sides. Look at the way she even consumes the betel leaves. There is nothing very feminine or decorous about it. She just goes for it. Then she rested her chin on her hands and sat gazing idly at the jostling crowd on the platform. This attitude, resting one's chin on the hands, is a very interesting attitude, because it also draws attention to the fact that that person is, alone. There's an aura of loneliness about that gesture, and she sat gazing idly. She's bored, she's traveling alone, and she enjoys or spends time people watching on the platform. So this resting the chin on her hands once again evokes the image of her at home, probably doing the same thing while she's watching the people outside her window. So again, the isolated, neglected wife trope is evoked in this image too. Okay, let's see what exactly is Zenana interclass. This compartment is reserved for women and children, and one critic says that Zenana interclass was one half step above third class and one half step below second. So it is an in-between class, a class that is between two categories, almost a liminal space, neither here nor there, but in between. So the women were put in this compartment by the men folk when they were traveling in those days. As I said, this space of the Zenana is a liminal space between two categories, neither belonging with the upper class nor belonging to the lower class. For example, Sir Mohan Lal is traveling first class, but the Zenana doesn't belong with the masculine space there, and at the same time the Zenana doesn't also belong with the third class, along with the really poor and working classes. So the women's category is an in-between category, and the wife, who's also a servant for Sir Mohan Lal, travels in this in-between and liminal space. Okay, so what are the set of themes that we can understand through a very close study of Sir Mohan Lal and his relationships with the others, such as his wife and servants, and then his understandings of English society and culture, his education that he has derived from Oxford and the Inns Temple, and the time that he spent at dinner and all these places in London. So the one point that is very, very clear is that he has a very, very prejudiced attitude towards Indians and their lifestyle, and a very superior belief about the English culture. And the other thing that is very clear to us is that his understanding of British culture is patchy, it's incomplete, it's one-sided, and it is blinkered. And it's only usually about the upper classes. Okay, the other thing that we need to understand is that he behaves as if an imperial English gentleman would behave. So he is identifying himself with the colonial master, with the imperial figure. He is not perceiving himself as a native. He perceives himself as a colonizer slash master slash white man who would want to remain unmixed, especially during the later part of the colonial period when empire was at its peak. The British wanted to remain unmixed with the local population, the native. So he is adopting, Sir Mohan Lal is adopting such an attitude of purity as much as it is capable in his context, and that's a very, very disturbing attitude of Sir Mohan Lal. So, we have done an extended analysis of his character and his associations with his wife and servants. So, such a process, what is the benefit of such a process? It kind of gives us a window into the identity of the central character. We are moving from a very physical appearance and its implications to the workings of his mind, which really desires a particular set of things out of life, and then we move into an analysis of his relationships, and then we finally make certain extrapolations in the social and cultural background to get into the heart of this character. So it's a process which networks several layers and aspects to arrive at the most important identity that Sir Mohan Lal has or sought for himself. So, he thinks that he is a cultured English man, or almost a cultured English man, even though he is a native. So, he is behaving as he is upper class, and he is Oxford educated, and he treats the natives condescendingly and as servants. So, these are the things that a cultured Englishman would adopt according to Sir Mohan Lal. So, he kind of adopts the same method in his behavior in the local scene. Now, what exactly is his chief merit? He was fond of conversation, and like a cultured Englishman, he could talk on almost any subject: books, politics, people. How frequently he heard English people say that he spoke like an Englishman. So, the last statement is the compliment that he gets after he has had a conversation with English folks. So, this is his prime merit in life, and he wants to put into practice this skill whenever he gets an opportunity, and he wants to get this compliment time and again from the English people that he meets. So, that is his object in life, that is his agenda, that's what makes Sir Mohan Lal tick. So, since he has this merit, he constantly wants an audience. So, he tries to seek an Englishman to show off this skill at conversations. And to attract attention, as we have seen, he has a few tricks. He has his Times newspaper, he has the Balliol tie, he has the whiskey, he has the cigarettes. So, using these set of weapons, he attracts his customers, so to speak. And why does he want to do this? For him, what is the benefit? The benefit is this: once he has attracted the attention, he could use the Englishman as a medium, as a conduit, through which to commune, to interact with his dear old England. So he uses this audience, this English gentleman or gentlemen, and through them he can somehow imaginatively go back to his beloved place, to his beloved Oxford, and he can talk about all those dons and tutors and boat races. So he could enjoy England second hand somehow, imaginatively, through fantasy. So that's why he seeks the attention of Englishmen. Now, so we get a sense of his identity, his personality, and his main motivation in life. So we know what he looks like and what drives him forth. Now, what exactly is the crisis in the story, and how is the crisis resolved? And once the crisis is resolved, what are the thematic implications of this crisis and its resolution? And opening the copy of the Times he had read several times before. So once he's there, he is terribly disappointed. Why is he disappointed? The compartment is empty. There are no Englishmen there on this compartment. So he, with a sigh of disappointment, sits down in a corner and he opens the Times that he has read several times. And look at the word studied gait, in a very, very practiced manner of walking. No exaggeration there, no hurry there, no excitement there. It's all done in a very, very measured, calculated manner. Calculated is the word that comes to my mind, and that tells you something about his psyche, which is which is probably not an admirable one that is constantly calculating to get a certain effect and result from the people around him. So he is disappointed and he waits, and after a while, instead of some English gentlemen, two English soldiers enter the compartment. And Sir Mohan Lal knows that they do not deserve to travel first class, because they are soldiers, they are entitled only to travel second class. But then he thinks that any English guy is an Englishman, so he would speak to the guard if there is any problem about their presence in the first class. And he notices that the narrator notices that they are inebriated, that they are drunk, and they call Sir Mohan Lal nigger by a very, very derogatory term. They refer to him as a black man, a Negro, and they ask him to get out of the compartment. And this is a shocking turn of events. Here we have Sir Mohan Lal, who is waiting to welcome an English gentleman or any Englishman for that matter, and we have two English soldiers who, when they enter, they want him out. He says, I say, surely, protested Sir Mohan in his Oxford accent. So he puts on the best accent to these two English guys, and he hopes that that would get a response from them. And it does. The soldiers pause. They kind of stop for a minute. It almost sounded like English to them, but they knew better than to trust their inebriated ears. So they are drunk, they know that, so they think that they are mishearing the words of this native. It sounds like English to them when it probably isn't. So they proceed to throw his things out of the train compartment. His thermos flask, his briefcase, his bedding, and the Times. More importantly, the Times. The most important weapon in his arsenal is the Times, one that would get the attention of this cultured English gentleman, also gets thrown. And he says, preposterous, preposterous, this is unbelievable, ludicrous attitude on their part, he shouted, and he's hoarse with anger. His voice is affected as well because he's terribly angry, and he cries, I'll have you arrested, and he calls for the guard, and guard, but there is no response. Again, Bill and Jim, the two soldiers, pause. It's the second time they pause. It did sound like English to their ears, but it was too much of the King's for them. It's too posh. It was too sophisticated for them to be believable. They didn't think that this native is capable of speaking English. And we also should remember that they are drunk. So this exchange between the two soldiers and Sir Mohan Lal is tragic, comic. It's funny. It's funny because we can see that he is putting on the best accent, and then that is failing to get any kind of response from the two soldiers, and the very fact that they are drunk makes them not realize the superiority of this native gentleman. And it's also very tragic on the other hand, because Sir Mohan Lal gets thrown out of the compartment. They manhandle him, they abuse him, and he gets ejected from the compartment when he has paid his ticket to be there, and that he has every right to be on that compartment, whereas these two soldiers just, are not supposed to be using that compartment. So it's very ironic as well that good English makes them suspicious. English doesn't kind of rescue this gentleman, this native gentleman, Sir Mohan Lal. Thank you for watching. I'll catch up with you in the next session.